Good morning, everyone. Tim here, aka Renfail, and today in this episode of Mondays in MMORPGs, we're talking about one of my favorite features in games these days, which is Minimaps. Specifically, I want to talk about why Minimaps are detrimental to games in terms of immersion, even though they are great from the point of view that they are convenient. So a good example of this is Star Wars The Old Republic. So when Star Wars The Old Republic first came out, I was absolutely enthralled by the game. This was something I'd been waiting on for years. It was Star Wars, it was BioWare, it was everything that I wanted it to be when it released. It was fun, iconic, and I could not stop playing. I spent several months at launch playing multiple characters up to level 50, did not take a break. It was the only thing I was playing, but I quickly became bored with it because of the nature of the end game. So it became quite grindy in terms of badges and dailies, pretty much like every other MMORPG that's been coming out for the last generation or two. So fast forward now, and it's been probably, 5 or 6 years since I've really played that game, and I cannot, for the life of me, remember anything specific in terms of the landscapes, cities, or places that we went, points of interest, etc. And that's despite the fact that even though I haven't played it full-time since it launched, I still have gone back and played it periodically for 2 or 3 months here and there over the years with friends, with my brother, so on and so forth. Even as recently as 2016. The only thing I can really remember about the game is that it's fun and it's Star Wars-y. But that's about it. I can't remember anything else. And it's not alone in this category. So there's been several MMORPGs over the years that I've played where I just can't remember how I got from point A to point B in any of these given zones, or even specific quest lines, which this ties back into the Milk Run episode that we did for the first episode in this series. But a lot of this also has to do with the simple fact that when you're led from point A to point B by your nose, you don't really ever learn anything. So all of these features that make games convenient, so, for example, speeders and flying mounts and horses and various types of transport that get you from point A to point B as quickly as possible, they're whisking you around from the city to outpost to the dungeon and then back again. And then anytime there's a quest where you need to complete an objective, there's a glowing trail leading you directly to the mobs that you need, or the ground spawn that you need, or the dungeon entrance that you need to find. So at no point in time are you ever invested in the game world with your mental faculties. You're simply being led around from point A to point B. I'm going to use my wife as the perfect example. We joke about this internally because she willingly admits that her navigational sense heading is horrible. And the reason is because most of the time when we're going around and doing things, she's on autopilot because I'm leading the way. So anytime she's with me and we're doing something where I'm the one who's come up with the map or I'm the one who's come up with the agenda, she's not paying attention. She's just going wherever it is that I tell her to go. And similarly, when she's the one taking charge of that, I don't really pick up where we're going and I don't really memorize those things because I'm not committing anything to memory because I'm just doing what I'm told. I'm just following because that's the easiest thing to do. And that's the thing. Convenience is easy. It makes things enjoyable. It makes things fun. And convenience also sells lots and lots of copies to the masses because they make these games accessible to the everyday person who doesn't have a lot of time to dedicate to a game. Now, I might get accused of having rose-colored glasses here, but I'd like to take a step back in time to EverQuest. Before the addition of Minimaps, before the addition of the Find feature that added glowing trails telling you how to get to NPCs and zone entrances and etc., and before you leveled up your sense heading skill, it was all about memorizing the zones. For example, the maze of bridges crisscrossing through Kelethin, the tunnels of the Warrens, the caverns of Sol A, the city of Runny Eye. And one of the most important elements of getting around in early EverQuest was the use of landmarks. And of course your sense heading skill, or how to use the loc functionality. But just like you would in the real world if you lacked a compass or if you didn't know which way was north, you would look around and find landmarks to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And technically, if we can go back even further than that to MUDs, where it was literally all about memorization, at least until the point where players started posting maps online telling you how to get through certain parts of the game, north, west, east, north, west, south, east, etc. And yes, even in EverQuest, players eventually created and posted maps on EQ Atlas, but prior to that point, we all had our own physical binders where we drew our own maps to get around. Put little notes down saying, go left at Orc Hill, take a right at the tree, go straight at the three direction fork, and etc. Now, back then, rather than relying on a game feature to lead you around, you had to learn your way around. You had to immerse yourself in the game world, become the character that you were playing, actually invest a portion of yourself into the world of Narath. You had to use your brain. And for this reason, I can still, to this day, lead you to the bank in Kelethin while blindfolded, despite the fact that it was only a starting city. And in the grand scheme of things, I only played there a fraction of the overall time that I spent in EverQuest. And that's because memorization produces a far more efficient memory, because it takes your brain beyond its limitations in terms of capacity and duration. So by memorizing things, you're effectively enhancing your cognitive abilities and thus your overall self. There's a boatload of scientific data out there if you want to delve into this subject in greater detail. But when you look at a game like EverQuest, the reason I can remember these things even 15, 18 years later is because of the fact that I had to memorize them. I wasn't being led from point A to point B. I actually had to figure things out. I had to learn my way around. I had to learn landmarks. I had to actually commit things to memory. So recently, as we've been delving back into our winter gaming session with our Saga of Lucimia gaming community, it's actually been a surprise to see how much of that EverQuest world was branded into our memories. And it's not just EQ, it's any game that any of us have ever played which didn't have a minimap, because we weren't leveraging convenience features to take us from point A to point B. We were actually investing ourselves in these games. These games, yeah, they were early games. They were light on features, right? So they were light on convenience. But these were the ones that force you to learn, to adapt, to survive. And these were the games that branded themselves in our memories, because it's just like the mathematical equations that we all had to learn in school. And we had to repeat these things day in and day out and commit them to memory. And some people might like to label these games as hardcore. We actually disagree. It's not hardcore to have to memorize something. That's just reality. The focus on realism to the point where the old school games ignored modern day features, like ignoring instant travel and minimaps and glowing trails. Because these old games focused on realism, they engaged our brains in a way that no other modern game does. And for us, when we're talking about building Saga of Lucimia, our primary focus, one of our primary pillars of gameplay, has always been immersion. This isn't just a game for us. We're building a living, breathing world. And as such, we want players invested in that world. We want them engaged. We want people from day one to know that we weren't going to include a minimap in our game. We're not going to give you glowing trails leading you from point A to point B. We're not going to give you any flashing icons over NPC heads telling you who you need to talk to. You need to immerse yourself in the world if you want to get around. You actually have to pay attention to conversations and dialogues, because there's going to be valuable clues and directions talking about landmarks and waypoints that you need to look out for. If you just spacebar your way through it, you're going to completely miss out on directions, and you're not going to know how to get from point A to point B, because you're all worried about convenience and going to the waypoint. We don't have waypoints, so you actually have to use your brain. You actually have to invest a part of yourself. We want our game to be one that players remember even 15 or 20 years later, just like with EverQuest. And so for us, we're focusing on immersing the players into our world as much as if they were there physically. This, again, is something that goes back to the tabletop world, because in a tabletop game, you don't have a waypoint system leading you from point A to point B. You don't have a mini-map telling you where to go. You literally have to go out and explore the world that's being presented before you. And that's what we're focused on. So for us, this is the reason we don't have mini-maps. What do you think? You like mini-maps? Do you not like mini-maps? Let me know. Let's continue the conversation. Let me know what you guys think, and don't forget to tune in next week for the next episode of Mondays in MMORPGs, where we're going to be continuing our conversation on all of the topics that are near and dear to my heart.